Hi, this is Gayle with BERNINA of Naperville, and are you ready to watch Twilight
You better hold on tight, Spider Monkey.
Garden with me? I bet you are. Now, here's the deal. Last month, I kind of laid it all out for you. This is a BERNINA of America program, and the official videos, instructions, handouts, all of those goodies live on the BERNINA Skill Hub. So what you're going to do is you're going to go there, and in the email that I gave you when you signed up for this program, you got like some instructions for me on how to set up your username and password on the BERNINA Skill Hub. You also got information for how to use those access codes, which will allow you essentially to buy the access codes from me, but then use them to pay for Twilight Garden on the BERNINA Skill Hub site. So you get all of those goodies, la 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 la, but then you come for me for some moral support to kind of help you and show you how I do things, because I do things a little bit differently, and then how you can practice and then take those practice pieces and put them into something that is practical, that will help us organize our thoughts, our supplies, our snippets, our instructions, and all of those good things as we go along this year-long program. Now, we're only in lesson 2, which is month 2 right now, so we've got a lot of fun ahead of us. So I wanted to start by, kind of just, no, I need you to listen. Come closer. Okay. All right. Okay, you're close enough. All right. This is a program designed to get your creative juices flowing. This is a program designed to help teach you how to do these things. Do you need to rigidly follow everything that I tell you, everything that Julie or Haley or Jamie or Kate or whoever is showing you different lesson plans tells you? No. At the end of the day, no, calm down. I want you to know that you're going to have plenty of fabric to make this your own. You can switch up like eggplant and plum if you want to. You can maybe even introduce a print fabric if that's what tickles your fancy. You can experiment with thread. And no, I'm not going to give you a discount on every single piece of thread that I might say I have in my stash. Come on, you want me to stay in business so that we can continue to have videos, don't you? I thought so. Okay. But this is a place for you to experiment, have fun, fail, and enjoy the goofs. Because without doing that, we don't learn. Also, without having to think for yourself and figure some things out, you might never learn as well. So I've already made some little mishaps and everything, and I'm going to share those with you today. But I want you at the end of the day to take a step back and tell yourself, this is just a block of the month sew along. I have plenty of fabric. I don't need to stress about anything. Gayle's going to help me. We have a plethora of tons of things that we can grab from to learn and make this quilt the most beautiful it can possibly be, right? I thought so. So now one more thing I want to talk about is you got your fabric from BERNINA of Naperville. BERNINA of Naperville is an independently, privately owned retail business in the Chicagoland area. I happen to be 2 miles away from the corporate office of BERNINA of America, and I happen to have worked there for 10 years, but no, you do not complain to BERNINA of America if you have a problem with your fabric kit, because that came from me. So lay it on me. I want to hear all about it, okay? Now, it's also very possible that, if you've watched my video, I've done a technique or something like that that you just don't understand. You know how to comment. I know you know how to comment in these videos. So that's what you're going to do, or you're going to send me an email, or you're going to call me. I give you my email and my phone number in the lesson plans in the presentation deck. Presentation deck? That's right. So BERNINA of Naperville puts together an interactive presentation deck where you can link to all sorts of fun things, charts, diagrams, instructions, free patterns, videos that I think will help you that aren't really associated with this video, but will help, those little juices flowing. So speaking of the deck, let's go over and look at it, and let's get started on this month's lesson.
Well, here we are, lesson 2, sideways motion stitching. Now, I do want to let you know something. I constantly call sideways motion multi-direction sewing. So you'll just have to forgive an old girl because it's hard for me because it was multi-motion when I started doing this. So, or multi-direction or whatever. Oh my God. You know what I'm getting at. Okay. So I added a thing here. So in your presentation deck, you can click here and actually see a high res image. This is the original quilt that we're looking at here. This is not the one that Julie and Jamie and Haley and um, Kate and all of those created. This is the original that was created over at Bernina International while they were developing the Bernina 990. So there are going to be some differences if you zoom in closely on this, but at least this gives you some idea when you're looking at it, what the quilt is all about, right? And maybe gives you some ideas to, put your own spin on things as well. So I also included a little bit more details about our schedule in person the first Tuesday of the month from 11 to 1. That's in person, a physical body here at our store in Naperville, Illinois. But we also at the same time have a video that premieres on the YouTube channel. It is not live. This is not a Zoom. This is a pre-recorded video that you're watching right now that has premiered at 11, and subsequently each month we will do it this way. And so what you can do as our sew along grows is you'll be able to watch the video and download the presentation deck from each month's here. So eventually, as you get these presentation decks from me and everything, right? You're not going to be able to be like, hey, Gail, can you give me month 3? I can't find that email. No, no, because you're going to have access to everything from just one presentation deck. Supplies, it's a long one. And I want you to notice I also put a disclaimer that supplies are subject to change and evolve. And that means that, like everybody who creates a sew along like this, we do our best to try to figure out what all are we going to be using for this. But we got a year. There might be new products that come out that I want to show you. There may be discontinuation of products, because, with tariffs and things like that, we've had to improvise and get product either from different distributors or we've had to get new things altogether. So don't worry, you're going to be able to make this with 5,000 different kinds of things. All right. Also, remember, Bernina of Naperville is giving you our extra projects each month, but because I haven't seen every last bit of the instructions yet, I can't really predict what I'm going to show you for some of these later lessons that are coming up. We talked about the kit. And with that in mind, why don't we just take a moment and talk about what we did for lesson 1 so you can see the botanic earth, the coastal vibes, and the strawberry kisses live and on tape here. So, I try my best to show you these blocks in the presentation deck, but let's just have a look. So we are looking at lesson 1 for the botanic earth colorway. And so I'll give you a moment to look at that. It's hard, like it's really hard. You might want to get really close to your monitor there. And then we have a little bit more contrast here with this one. Then this is where we added that pop of color with that half square triangle. And then once again with this piece. Then these are the pieces that Amy worked on. This is the Strawberry Kisses. And there's her other block. She is bolder in her color choices than me. I like to do everything, as you can guess, by our little pouch that we made in monochrome. And then this is what you saw us work on last time. I didn't deviate hardly at all from the standard instructions. There is the coastal vibes. So this was very subtle. I decided to go very blendy with this one. And then this had a little bit more contrast. And remember, last lesson, I didn't do the triple stitch in here, but I like that touch. So if you want to add that to yours, I'd highly recommend it. And for the most part, I'm trying my hardest to stick to the fabric assignments. But sometimes, as the spirit moves me, maybe I grab the wrong fabric, or maybe I just want to use a different fabric. And that's what I said in the intro is that we have enough fabric for sure in these combinations of kits that you've gotten so that you can kind of change things around, even at the last minute if you want to. Once again, I'm still giving you the coloring chart so that you can make your own or make some improvises. And as a reminder, the large size quilt is 96 by 96, and the small one is 60 by 72. So I also put this chart in your information because I thought you would like to get your head around what sizes the blocks end up finishing at. So do not cut or trim to these sizes because your cutting is going to be determined by the technique each month. And in many cases, you're going to be cutting a lot more fabric than you would traditionally need if you were not making a embellished quilt. So just keep that in mind, all right? Now, I also did kind of look at what are the overcutting sizes and all of these things. And I worked with a friend of mine and I put together a cutting diagram that might help you. It's a suggestion of how you should be cutting it. And if you cut it by these diagrams, you're going to have a generous amount left over. However, we are already in to month 2. So if you kind of just had at it and whacked a bunch of fabric off of your fabrics for last month, that's okay. You have enough. But these layouts were kind of laid out to be as economical as possible. So once again, I've even noted on here in spots where you have some extras that you can use for, you practice and things like that, because we are going to have a practice couple blocks this month to make our special project that we always do. So lesson 2 from the Bernina Skill Hub content is all about the sideways motion stitching. So you're going to stitch on 3 rectangular blocks that are going to be trimmed down in later lessons. So also, if you zig where you should have zagged on some of these blocks and a little corner doesn't look good or something isn't exactly how you like it, more than likely these blocks are going to be trimmed down. Now, we have provided you a little bit of a review of last month's blocks already and suggestions for the thread, fabric, stitches, and all of that. And I've provided you that same information coming up for the Bernina Skill Hub lessons because I've already watched the lessons and made the blocks. But let's have a look at the actual blocks that we're making this month, the way that I stitched them out, because hopefully you have already as well watched the Bernina Skill Hub lessons. So I think this, I did not do the straight up lesson 1. So let's just start with these, or not lesson 1, but this is lesson 2, but I did not do the first one exactly. So you can see here, I've played around with thread color, and in your presentation deck, I give you the exact thread colors that I'm using and the numbers of the stitches and all of that stuff. And now remember that in the videos from the Bernina Skill Hub, this is how dense this design comes out. And then Julie has you adjust the stitch density on this one, but the stitch remains the same. That was the teaching part of this lesson. So, if you're more into symmetry and you just can't handle your big bad self, don't forget, always have practice blocks. You've got plenty of fabric to do that. And then this is where I went out on my own. I went a little rogue. And so I just think this looks so much like a flamingo. So I picked this stitch. There's that topsy-turvy vine. I found these beautiful this wave stitch and then some other things. And when I pick the stitches, I don't think so hard about it. I just kind of go, oh, I think this will look good. Do. And then of course this was one that I wouldn't call a mistake, but it was something that I improvised on just because I didn't want to rip out any stitches. Okay, so now let's go to our botanic earth, and you can see that you recognize this stitch from today's lesson. And then I added honeycombs. There's that stitch from today's lesson. And also I want to show you, if you look really closely here, you'll see on this stitch that I did not use the yellow bobbin case on this one right here, but I did on this one. And there's a difference in the two. And then I love the fern. I love the way that these looked. Really cool. Then we have another block with a mistake or an oversight, perhaps. So this is straight up lesson two, part one, rather, where you're doing the smaller 13, 15 millimeter wide multi-direction stitches, right? And you're not supposed to stitch on the center line. Well, guess who did? Me. But who cares, right? So I just did my stitch on top of the center line stitching, and I don't care. I think it looks fantastic. So, not ripping anything out. I think it's beautiful. I love it. I meant to do that, as far as you guys know. Then let's have a look at this one, just messing around with the colors, pulling out those brighter colors in our Botanic Earth thread kit. So, hope that you like that. Now, there's a couple of others to look at, and I'll show you those when I get to the store because Amy's working on the Strawberry Kisses, which I did not bring with me this evening.
Okay, so here's Amy's work, and you can see, look at that bright orange. That's just awesome. And she did such a great job of lining it up, better than me, I have to say. And you can see she chose to do the density removal on both sides so it's symmetric. And you might also notice that she did the same stitch here and here rather than having one and then another. And so that's fine. So this is how you can make it your own. There are no rules here, and we don't judge. But I do want to show you, see this is her chalk line here, and we were able to get it off of this one. This is where you use a scrap piece of fabric, the sleeve of your blouse, I don't know, whatever you have hanging around, and you just give it a little friction rub like this, and then it will get that off. I can't do it because I'm holding the phone with one hand, but Amy's over here. Amy, can you hold this phone so I can rub-a-dub-dub on your blocks there? Here we go. And you just kind of, I don't recommend that you use your silk blouse for this at home, but it's what I have available to me right now. You can't see the line, can you, Amy?
No.
So, lesson two on the Bernina Skill Hub, there are 3 different ways that they break it down. Part one is smaller sideways motion stitches, about 13 millimeters to 20 millimeters wide. These are easier to stitch out because, as you'll see when I show you how I did my practice pieces, the machine doesn't move around as much. Those feed dogs have limited movement so that it's easier to control. Part two is larger stitches. And this is once again to help practice keeping things straight. Because as we get into larger designs, you need constant vigilance, my friends. Okay. And then the part three is combining sideways motion stitches together in combi mode. And it's using the jumbo stitch function to either make something bigger or, can you believe it, make a large stitch smaller. So let's look at the blocks. If you're making the large quilt, the 96 by 96 inch, this is kind of the breakdown of these blocks. And you can see the embellished ones here. Now remember, this is from the original quilt. So the stitches are going to vary based on the ones that you're going to learn in the Skill Hub lessons. But you can see here how they're used. 2 of them get kind of cut into this little roundy shape. And then one of them remains a rectangle, but a smaller rectangle. In the small quilt, you are making the small piece here. So you only essentially have to make one of the rectangles, but if you want to make 3, you can save your other 2 for your special project. Great. So for your supplies for lesson 2, the one thing that we're adding at Bernina of Naperville is for you to have 2 pieces that are 9 by 12 inches of cotton that is adhered with fusible woven interfacing on the on the backside, and then to have two 9-inch by 12-inch pieces of lightweight tearaway stabilizers. So there'll be a piece of lightweight tearaway on each of your cotton pieces, and these are going to be your practice pieces. I'm using the reverse pattern foot number 1D, the sideways motion foot number 40C, and for our special project, we're using the number 53 straight stitch non-stick foot and the number 10D edge stitch foot. I have added these items to your special discount that you get if you use the code at checkout, so don't worry about that. We're going to need the 9mm stitch plate, the right seam guide if you're doing it with Julie's technique, a freehand system, high thread bobbin tension case, and then these needles that we used last month. And then just in general, all of the thread from our thread kits. I have not introduced any new thread or thread colors this month. So you will want to add all of these instructions and diagrams and all these printed materials into a 3-ring binder. And I think you're going to need about a 2-inch 3-ring binder, and make sure that you have a lot of clear page protectors for 8.5 by 11-inch paper. I've also put the pink thread that Julie used last month. There is a spool of 28 weight and a spool of 40 weight. And I have put those in here for you. I also added the big book of stitches because I think once you do some of these exercises, you're going to want to explore more. And that big book of stitches is really going to take you down the road of being an expert at using your decorative stitches. So let's talk a little bit about marking pens. I have two practice pieces here. These are about 9 inches by 10.5 inches, something like that, maybe 9 inches by 12 inches. Let's have a look. Yes, 9 inches by 12 inches. And I've got a little collection of marking pens. Now, you might recognize this bag because I linked you to the pattern for this last month. And, it's kind of cute. It's got a bunch of zippers and it can sit up like this and hold a bunch of things. Well, if this was a little bit too difficult for you or whatever, I am going to use my scraps here for my practice pieces to make a easier step version of I'm calling this our Trapper Keeper binder pouch, but this was something that was created by Amy at BU or Bernina University last summer in Salt Lake City, and Megan Fries from Bernina actually designed this and everything. So I adapted this pattern to be able to create something out of some of our practice pieces. So hope you enjoy it, and I'll show you my work in progress and everything. But Megan has some really good instructions, and I have just changed the language, changed the terminology so that it resonates with you and your practice pieces. So that is linked in our interactive presentation deck. So back to the bag of stuff. So I have all kinds of marking devices in here, and I want to talk about these with you. And some of them are no longer available. That's just the way it is, okay? And some of them are brand new. So let's just kind of have a look at some of these. There we go. Okay, so let's start simple with what they've recommended at Bernina, and that is this magic chalk liner with a little brush, a cap, and it's essentially what I've been using for years, which is this red, I think this is called a chalk wheel. It's refillable. So is this, by the way. But the difference is this is like a pen and this is like the old tailor's chalk shape, which is why it's in this like little triangular shape. Both of these kind of remove with friction, or if you want to use like the brush there, it can kind of remove it, but eventually the chalk just like wears off after time. The benefit of the chalk liner is that it doesn't really require water or any other kind of chemical or whatever to remove it. So this is what, I've been kind of using for my blocks there. Let's look at some other options. So some of you have been like, well, I'm doing the coastal. And with this coastal collection, there's a lot of light background fabric. You can see here's this is the sea glass, This is the fresh water. This is now this is getting a little bit darker, whatever. This is Cozumel. And then here are our blocks from last month. So I've been stitching on the sea glass, and then there's the icy mint there, which is our background. And so white chalk doesn't necessarily show up on this very well, right? So we have options, don't worry, okay? One of them is this water-soluble pen that you see here. Now, the water-soluble pens, the interesting thing about them is it's got like this bright blue ink, which will work very well on our coastal fabric. But the blue, you tend to, when you want to mark on this fabric, your tendencies are to, keep drawing until the mark shows up really bright. But the more you go over and over and over on your piece, the more water that you need. So if you're doing the coastal and you want to switch to this water soluble blue marking pen, hey, that's no problem. Just be light-handed with it because remember, how much do you really want to get this wet? I mean, these should be washable. You can throw it in the wash, scrub it up, dub, and all of that stuff. But just be mindful that the more heavy-handed you are, the more water requires for the stuff to dissolve. And then sometimes if you just put water right here on this spot, if you have a lot of ink in there, it tends to bleed and it will go other places. So you just keep having to dilute it until the blue goes away. One thing I found is I have used the Soline version of these water erase markers for a long time, and I've even pressed it with a little bit of blue in it, and it is not heat set it. So just, this is a tried and true pen that I really like. Now, one of another type of pen are these heat vanishing pens. Now, this is a red one, but these also will go on a little bit darker after you have the ink has dried, right? Or you can kind of go a little heavy-handed with it and whatever, like this. And these are going to heat away with a dry iron. And the benefit of these is that I can be heavy-handed and they're still going to iron away. The disadvantage of these is if I have to do a little pressing and I haven't yet used my markings on my fabric, I might accidentally erase my marks. So, this has some disadvantages here. Also, this particular kind that you see right here that I have, they dry out really easily. In fact, this one I thought for sure was totally fine, but it has no ink, it's dried out, whatever, we got to toss it. Now, there is a replacement for this set. This set used to come with about 6 different colors. Well, now we have this all-in-one pen from Nifty Notions. And this one is like those old pens that we all used in grade school, where we have red, blue, yellow, black, like this. And this is the same thing. So let's take a blue, for instance, and now let's draw on here. There we go. And we can see our blue there. Ooh la la. Very nice. Okay. And then it retracts and then everything is good. So this would be a great option for you if you know you're going to be working with all different kinds of colors. So now what if you have something super dark? This is a scrap of the eggplant, and this is the fabric from our magical Twilight colorway, right? Well, let's look at this pen. There's a yellow option here. Let's have a little look at this. Now, this is the first time I'm using it, so the little tips have little wax protectors on them there. So let's draw that on there and see if we can kind of see. Let's wait and see if it shows up for us, right? We also have, this is the Bohin, Bohin. This is a French company. This is their this is their heat vanishing pen. And this one I like a little bit better. One line is going to do the trick. And you can see as I'm talking to you and we're waiting, these little guys are showing up. If you need a little bit more heavy-handed, you can of course rub over it a few times, but it's not going to present super white until we are totally finished with that drying so we can really see what we're looking at. Now, Another thing that's kind of nice if you're talking about marking on dark to medium color fabrics are our perfect pencils. Now, the fun thing about these is if you're like me and you misplace things all of the time, you get two of them. And sometimes I break them in half, so I have four. The disadvantage of these is you can see they are not very sharp. So what I typically do is I will use my makeup pencil and I will sharpen these in my makeup pencil to get a nice little point there. And then as the like heat vanishing element of it gets down here, you tear this and they sharpen like the old teacher's wax pens. So there you can see I was able to sharpen it a little bit. And this is like the cheapest thing I could find at Michael's, you know. Last but not least, if you've ever seen something like this is called a Hera marker, and you might see these in finger pressing sets. You might also see these in book folding, paper folding, origami kits, and things like that. What you do with these, and these will wear after a while, but with these, you can kind of find the center of what you're working with or where you want to start making your lines, right? I said this was 12, so we need to measure in 6 inches. Well, let's go ahead and see if that will show up as a line. And what I've done there is I've creased it with this. And sometimes with these, you need to put a little bit of batting or something behind your work, maybe even like, you know, a couple layers of fabric or whatever the case is, right? So that it's making that crease. I have had success doing crosshatch marks with something like this. And that, you know, kind of makes a line that we can see. And then once, you know, it's on there, you can rub it off or whatever the case is, right? We talked about this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some lines radiating from the center, and we're going to stitch on these just like we would for our actual project for our Twilight Garden pieces. I'm going to make these lines every inch, and I'm going to start with making these lines with my perfect pencil. And since we're doing heat vanishing, why don't I go ahead and try some others with our new pen that we have here. And then one thing too that I would like to recommend is that don't try to use your pens and with such high contrast. If you have a lot of different options, consider picking something close. So then when you remove it, if you can't get every last little speck of it out at first, it's not as contrasty, so it doesn't show up as much. Okay, so there's our heat vanishing. And now why don't we try our blue marking pen with this one? See how it might show up on something that is essentially blue. I can see it from my vantage point. Okay, I'm going to try the Bowen pen. The fun part about these is I have to just double check where to put my ruler because I am too impatient to wait for the little marks to dry. But they show up quite nicely once the ink starts to dry. Okay, maybe we should try that yellow one again. One benefit of the ones with the pen, it gets much closer to the line. Make sure that you click away so that your tip gets covered there. Because the disadvantage of our chalk liner and our magic chalk liner is that sometimes when you go to mark these and you're trying to get that marking right on that 1 inch line, it's not quite at the inch, and you have to compensate when you line your piece up just because this piece is domed over and it's hard to get it really close to the ruler. Okay. But there are our marks and playing around with our pens. And, I've been told I need to start practicing putting my stuff away. So here we go.
Okay, so here is one of my marked pieces, my practice piece, and this is the 40 weight lighter blue from our Magic Twilight Garden thread kit, and I've got the 40 weight spool here. So I did something a little bit different this month with our Twilight Garden pieces, and this goes for all of the different colorways that I happen to stitch, and I'm stitching the Botanic Earth and the Coastal and the Original. So instead of stitching on the lines with the straight stitch and the 28 weight thread, I am picking a triple stitch, which is the number 6 straight stitch, but it does it triple. And I'm doing this one exactly from the default settings, but I'm using 40 weight thread in the bottom and 40 weight thread in the top. And I am using my yellow bobbin case. And for this particular color, I'm going to be using, let's see, what did we decide this was? This is 2715. I'm using this for the bobbin for all of the stitching I'm doing on this color. I have the 80 microtex needle in here, and I have activated the laser. It's a little hard to see with that number 1D foot on, but I do have it on. And now I'm just going to go right to left, and I also have a lightweight tearaway stabilizer under this piece, but it also has fusible woven on the back. And remember, this is just my practice piece that's going to end up being in my little Trapper Keeper binder pouch. And now, one thing that happens with this, it kind of gives you the same look as that 28 weight thread. So let this just be a little note to you that if you ever wanted something to present a little bit thicker and you did not have a heavier weight thread in that color, you could choose the triple stitch function on your 990, or you could do that as well on the 790. Even the 570 has triple stitch. Some of your Berninas, have this feature standard, so make sure you check your manual for that feature if you're not using a 990. But this is just, another way to do things. So I've got the purple 28 weight loaded up, and same thread, the 40 weight blue in the bobbin. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the changes that I made to the decorative stitches, because I, decided I wanted to make my own. So when I do that, I rely heavily on my camera. I just want to change to my 40C foot here. I also do not put the guide on the side of my 40C. I just use the side of my presser foot. So just thought I would share with you how I do things. I did like some of these fun decorative stitches that are in the 200 category. So I'm going to zip down here to stitch number 224 specifically. This one is really intricate. Now, I do want to explain to you that these stitches, you have 3 exercises that you're going to do this month with Julie in the Skill Hub courses, and she kind of starts you off with multi-direction stitches that are a lot less wide than these 32 by 6. So let's look at some others on here just so I can kind of ease you into this a little bit. These little floral designs, a lot of them are super big, like stitch number 222, that one's 31.8. Let's look at 231. 231 is a lot narrower, and you can see if I kind of zoom you in here between here. See how that fits nicely? And remember that our machine is like 9mm maximum width without multi-direction or sideways motion stitches. So this one would be a great one to start if you wanted to practice. I am well practiced, haha, and so I might be a little bit more daring and pick, you know, stitches like this one. Now this one's at 22 millimeters, but let's go back to this one, and you can see in our 1-inch area that's going to be way too wide. So I might want to stitch this in some of the areas I skipped a stitch there in the middle. But then I might decide I want to make this larger or smaller. And that's where Julie's going to take you through using jumbo stitch. And why would you use jumbo stitch for something that's larger? Well, because what's so cool is we can make jumbo stitches smaller and we can make them larger. So for instance, if I wanted to fit this design within the parameters of my 1-inch lines there, I could do that. That reduced it to 61% of its size, and now I could stitch it out. Now, I'm going to touch this so it goes back to normal there. I don't want to do that. In fact, I'm going to be stitching mine like here, and I might be tempted. Ooh, that's a little bit too big. But I can use my knobs to adjust this a little bit. And you know, maybe for me, let's just call it 120. Maybe that will be good. This is, remember, a practice piece that I'm doing right here. So let's have a look and see how this stitches out. But as I put my foot on and everything, I do want to stress to you how important it is for you to watch those Skill Hub courses to get your practice, to get the gist of things before you really branch out on your own. If you've not been using, you know, the decorative side of your machine, you know, and that kind of stuff. Another thing I wanted to show you when we're dealing with multi-direction sewing with this sideways motion foot, you'll notice it doesn't have a slit to tuck your thread under. So I just do this and pull my thread under like so, just so it's not in my way. So with this piece, I can start with my laser right on the middle line that I did not stitch on here. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch this and hold my mouth right and remember to breathe and all of those good things. And as I'm stitching, I do kind of watch the camera on the machine, but mostly I'm watching how straight and parallel the side of my foot is to that previously stitched line. And you're only doing fingertip guidance, and you also don't want to go super slow. I know for some of you this is going to be very scary, but you want to maintain a consistent speed. Now, I'm going to go ahead and press the cut button because we're coming off of the edge of my fabric here. And let's look at this stitch. So, you know, for the most part, it gets an A+. There were a couple little hiccups here. See how that didn't quite connect there? And the same down here. Let's compare it to the one I did first. So this is my Coastal Vibes, where I went totally on my own and did all of these stitches. Don't worry, in the presentation deck, I have shown you exactly all of these stitches and everything that I did to them. And I'll talk you through that just so you don't get overwhelmed. But what I wanted to show you is when I stitched this out, see how I had a little indiscretion there? And there, they were all over the place. I just wasn't as good at working with this stitch at the beginning. So the one thing that I don't like to do, honestly, is to rip. I feel like there's so much going on with this quilt. I feel like by the end of the day, after it's quilted, after it's bound, after, you know, it's hanging over the sofa or wherever this is going to go, we're not going to focus on each one of these stitches like this. So what I ended up doing is I went back to that triple stitch, the same one that I used here, with that same coral thread, and I just stitched down that line, then I cut, then I stitched down this line, and then I cut there. And what I found is, hey, you know what? I showed this around the store and nobody even noticed. Okay, so we talked about that one. So why don't we go back to this one? This one that is a little bit narrow that we're gonna stitch maybe right down the middle of our piece like this. So this one, I'm just kind of eyeballing it by using the camera. I'm not trying to align the laser in the middle or whatever. I'm just using my camera as my guide. Now, it turns out that indeed, when I start the laser in the middle, this stitch is lined up right there in between the two lines. So why don't we go ahead and stitch it? And you can see with this one, that it's not moving all over the place like with this other one that we stitched. And this is why it's a good idea to, experiment with some easy ones first. And you might have already noticed, if you're like me and you have a lead foot, the machine will not let you stitch these multi-direction or sideways motion stitches, whatever. The machine will not let you stitch super duper fast. Well, that came out great. Let's stitch it again over here. So this is another stitch that I used this month. I used this one in my Botanic Earth colorway on that gingerbread brown. And this one I enlarged as well. So this one I ended up enlarging, set it at 128%. So I used my multifunction knob and I kept my pattern proportion. And so if we look over here, last month I taught you how to program your securing or your tie-off program here. So if you're doing this on your Twilight Garden quilt, for any of your stitches, you're going to do this because it will help when you remove the stabilizer to keep your stitches from coming apart. This thing, I'm not removing the stabilizer on. It's going to be my Trapper Keeper binder pouch. So I'm going to leave the stabilizer in there. But for you, if you are removing stabilizer, go ahead and do this. So I've got that set. And then I'm also going to use this to end. That's how you're going to secure your stitches so the stabilizer won't rip them off, right? I've also changed my thread to the dark eggplant color. And when I changed to 28 weight thread here, I also changed my needle to the top stitch 90. I forgot to tell you that, but we should be getting used to that by now, right? Okay, so I've got the securing stitch and it's gonna do its little stitching. And now here we go. And remember, I'm lining up this sides of the feet to make sure that they're parallel to my previous stitching. And there's that one. I'm pretty happy with my lining and my ability to pay attention stitching that one out. Okay, so the other kind of stitch I wanted to talk to you about were the ones that aren't necessarily multi-direction or sideways motion. And so I'm going to look in our 100 section here, and there's some new ones that they added down here. And this is one that I used. And this one, the default setting on it is 9mm wide, but I want it to fit within my little piece here. So when I worked on my Botanic Earth version, I took this stitch and I moved the needle position. I don't know if this really matters, okay, but I moved the needle position and then I did jumbo stitch at 208. So I hit the plus 100, then I used my knob to dial that up to 8. Now let's see, did that needle position really make a difference? It didn't, so don't bother moving the needle position. But you are going to pay attention on the camera. And the reason why this one's tricky is because we're not aligning our start or our laser in the middle of the stitch. We're paying attention to what the camera is doing. So let's go down. Let's go down there and see what's happening. Okay, so on my screen, my trees are nicely aligned. But if you look at where I'm starting, it's a little weird. This isn't exactly on the line here, blah, 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 but this is where I like it. So I'm gonna kind of keep everything nice and straight down here, and I'm gonna be referencing my stitch out on my camera on the screen of my machine. I remembered to hit the pretzel. Well, look at that. Now that's super cute. So I'm just gonna simply hop into my edit menu and I'm gonna mirror this. And now I'm lining it up over here and I am going to stitch it just like I stitched on the other side. No big deal, hitting the pretzel, making sure I do pattern begin, making sure I do pattern end when I get close to the end, and watching my little trees in between the lines here and here on the camera of my machine.
All right, so here is a finished practice piece. Now, I don't know about you, but I think this looks pretty darn good for practice. So I'm going to put this aside and let's I'm just going to play around with this one, I guess. I mean, I feel like I told you everything you needed to know in this one, but let's just play around with another one. And I'll meet you back here to talk about what I did on this.
All right, I wanted you to join me here to show you maybe something that you didn't know about, right? So I'm going to pick stitch number 234 twice. And then I'm going to go into my edit and I'm going to make sure that I take that second one and I mirror it. Now, sometimes when you, and let's zoom in really close here so you can see what I'm talking about. Sometimes when you do something like this, it creates this little jump stitch that way. But if I touch this design, and let's say I want to move it to create more of a visual serpentine stitch, look what happens. The engine of my software in my machine adds a little jump stitch there, a little travel stitch to get it from there to there. Let's do undo so we can see this beforehand. Now it looks nice, but to me the little curve isn't perfect. So by pushing this here to get my little serpentine stitch the way I want it, it's gonna add a little stitch to get me there. Let's try stitching this out. So I'm gonna touch my first one there. I'm gonna touch my pretzel, and now we're gonna stitch this somewhere on my design, somewhere on this blank piece of fabric. All right, let's look at what happened here. It did exactly what I wanted here, but instead of bringing the tail back to here, it created a stitch. I'm not sure I like that. That's not what I was looking for. Am I going to change it? Heck no. I'm going to make some more adjustments and we're going to stitch it over here and see if it makes any difference. Okay, so it's this little dude is the one in question. That was that extra little stitch I didn't like. So I'm going to press, hold, and swipe to get that one out of there. And I think I'm going to like it now. Well, let's just see. Let's see if I like it. So now I'm going to engage my little securing feature and start stitching again. So there's this one. versus this one. Slightly different. There's no long jump stitch between the two like there was over here. All right, so now I want to show you what one of the hardest things to stitch out with multi-direction or sideways motion stitching is. Let's take this one for instance and set our jumbo stitch like the Bernina instructions want us to, right? And you can see that it's the nature of the very geometric design that makes this a little bit more challenging. So I'm going to go ahead and line this up down the middle of my work here. But I want this to kind of stitch down the middle like so. So on my camera, I'm having this intersection go down a drawn chalk line. Let's try that other one that was difficult. This one is 1201. I'm opening up jumbo stitch. Okay, so there is part of our stitches. And we'll take our marks out. It'll look better. It always does. But here's what we just stitched. That one came out pretty good. This was 300%. All right, there's one more thing I want to show you. Let's work with the most basic of stitches, which would be our tulip. Let's go into jumbo and make it 300%. Let's go back and add triple stitch to it. And now let's stitch it out. I'm going to start this by lining the left side of my foot up with the middle stitch line, and let's just see what happens, shall we? And I want to make sure I'm getting it right at the start of my fabric there. Okay, so I've made a combo stitch with stitch number 730. I went into edit and each one I applied triple stitch to. Then I selected all and used jumbo stitch and did it at 125%. Triple stitch is this one, jumbo stitch is that one. So now we're going to stitch. See how this little guy turns out. And then I stitched all of these that you see here. I used the 40 weight thread. Now I've switched over to the 28 weight. And all I'm doing with this is I just want you to see the difference with using like a triple stitch with the 28 weight. And I'm going to stitch this right to the side here and hopefully not go into my tulips. Definitely looks thicker, more ribbon-like. All right, let's have a look. All right. Okay, so just let your iron get those markings out of there. And also, this is one where you might also consider before you start ironing your stabilizer, because it will kind of shrink up your stabilizer a little bit in case you want to iron with stabilizer on. But you can see the back side and the front side here. This one was my chalk.
So I did some sewing off camera, and one of the things was I did the buttonhole piece that's going to fit into my binder. I added the zipper, and I took my pieces and trimmed them to 7 1/4 from here and here to 10 1/2. And now I just have to decide which piece do I want on the center. This one is just so pretty. I want to keep this on the back. So now I'm going to put these right sides together like so, and I'm going to pin and stitch and turn inside out. And don't forget the instructions for making this I've included in your presentation deck for lesson 2. Okay, so I stitched it and now it's that magic turning time that we all love. So now I can add some of these pages into my notebook. And if you're interested, I have given you a link to our super cute notebook cover, our Twilight Garden. If you know, you know, you know. You can see here, I did include some cutting diagrams for you if you want to, have a little bit of guide of as to how all of this yardage you have is going to play out and all of that stuff, right? And then you can recognize here's our supply list, and here is what our quilt is going to look like, hopefully at the end, right? And now I'm adding a little pouch here that matches my work. So I can put my marking pens in there. Any little things I might need for these lessons can go in here. Whatever you want to put in there. And then it stays with your trapper keeper.
Do you trust me?
In theory.
Then close your eyes.
All right. Did I lead you astray? Do you feel like you've been abandoned with any of your questions? Well, you know the drill. Email me, call me, send a smoke signal, but maybe not on Facebook or something because I don't really check that ever. It's just I got enough stuff to look at, right? So anyway, I'm really enjoying making this project. I really, really, really enjoy the stitching aspect and making these different designs and patterns and things like that. And next month, if the 990 doesn't have enough stitches for you, well, next month we're going to learn how to use Stitch Designer to make an existing stitch more our own, or I might even show you how to write a secret message. Who knows, All right. So if you want to check out some of Bernina of Naperville's other videos that have nothing to do with Twilight Garden, please be our guest. It's at our YouTube channel, which is easy to find. It's youtube.com/Bernina of Naperville, where you can like, comment, and subscribe. So no matter what you're making, have fun doing it, and I'll see you next month. Cheers.